There's this thing that's occurring as I'm getting older, and it's called "I can see, but not always as well." So we have to, put on the glasses, make sure that we can see what we can see. So the best part about glasses and my vision is that it helps me see what's up close, and so now I don't get to see you all. I don't know if that's good or bad. Let's see if this technology is working, and we have a slide going. Oh, okay, it's going. Well, welcome to the last sermon of the year. And I'll see if I can get this held correctly so that I'm heard by everyone that's here and those that are listening online, wherever you might be, or in the future. That's the beauty of live streaming and time travel. So a couple weeks ago, I was at New Carlisle, and Ron came up to me and asked me, he's like, "Do you have a message?" And this was, I think, the second week of December. And I was like, yes, I do. It's called The Other Guys. That's the only thing that was actually written down. And actually, as I heard Ron's sermon, which do you all remember? Him talking about Naaman. So when talking about Naaman, it really solidified the idea that I had going through my head about the other guys. We always have these stories. We always have these heroes. We look at pop culture. We look at scripture. We look at everything. There's always the hero. There's always that one person that you look to. But personally, I'm more interested in the other guys. There was a great movie. There was a comedy. I know those that might recognize the title, The Other Guys. It's those that they're the second tier. They're not the heroes. They are the heroes of their own story, but they're never in the spotlight. It's always, you have the swagger, you have the mane, and then there's the other guys. This has been a concept that had been going around in my head for a while because there isn't enough attention that goes and looks at the other guys. Why not? We look at these heroes, we look at these people that we want to look up to, and they're always on the pedestal. They're always the, everything that you aspire to be. But the most interesting stories that I have found in reading, culture, even in scriptures we'll look at, is the others. There is a lot of people that are in the shadows, that are overshadowed, but are just as important. My son told me last year, because I get this privilege of this sermon of the last one of the year. He was like, "Did you write it the night before?" Thankfully, this time I can say, and I can tell Ron, no, none of this was written last night. It was written a week ago. It was written a week ago. Last night was just the finishing touches, the polish. So in my professional life, I'm a consultant. I get to talk to different people. I get to be changing into that role of being leaders of leaders, and it's not a fun place to be. As I'm seem to be transitioning more and more towards leadership, I wish I could continue to stay amongst this group. And I still think that I'm there. And I think we should also look around at some of the others that we have in the church. We have song leaders. We have people running AV in the back. We have many different people that work throughout the church just to make it function. So I'm going to now focus on the overlooked, the unnoticed, the other guy. So let's first start off with a story. Stories are always a good place to start. As we get into this story, we're going to talk about Eli the stonecutter. So once upon a time, in a small, bustling village, there was a stonecutter named Eli. Every day, Eli rose before the sun, his hands weathered, strong from years of shaping unyielding stone. He worked diligently, crafting stones for the village, for their homes, for their roads and their walls. Yet despite this vital role, Eli remained unnoticed by those around him. As the village prospered and grew, a grand cathedral began to take shape at the heart, and it was the crowning jewel of the village, a testament to their faith and community. Stonecutters from far and wide were called, and Eli, like many others, contributed his skill to this great endeavor. Days turned into months, and months into years. The cathedral, with its soaring spires and intricate carvings, neared completion. It stood magnificent, a beacon of collective achievement and spiritual devotion. The day of its consecration arrived, and the village gathered in celebration. Praises were sung for the architects, the artists, the patrons who had made this marvel possible. In the midst of the celebration, Eli stood at the back of the crowd, his eyes tracing the lines of the stones that he had shaped with his own hands. No one around him knew of his contribution. No words of gratitude reached his ears. No acknowledgments were made of the hands that had toiled in silence. As the crowd rejoiced, Eli's heart grew heavy. He had given his all, his very essence, to this grand structure, yet he remained invisible in the eyes of those he served. In that moment, Eli realized a profound truth of his existence: the silent sacrifice, the unacknowledged devotion, the quiet strength that lie in being overlooked. Let's pray. Dear Lord, thank you for being with us throughout this year, 2023. Please be with me in this message as we go through and look at the overlooked, the invisible. Help us to understand this role. Help us to understand how we work and how we should respond. And I thank you for all this in your name. Amen. So we get a little further. I'm going to look again, thank you, Duncan, for reading the scripture. 1 Corinthians 12. This is a very interesting chapter and also digs a little bit more into this concept. So we'll go back to where Duncan started, and we'll go a little further. So it says, just as a body, though one, has many parts, but all its many parts form one body, so it is with Christ. For we were all baptized by one Spirit, so as to form one body, whether Jews or Gentiles, slave or free, and we are all given to the one Spirit to drink. Even so, the body is not made up of one part, but of many. See, this is where we're going to that problem of distance. I need to switch, take off the glasses. And then continuing on. Now, if the foot should say, because I am not a hand, I do not belong to the body, it would not for that reason stop being part of the body. And if the ear should say, because I'm not the eye, I do not belong to the body, it would not for the reason stop being part of the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would the sense of hearing be? So what I find very interesting about going through this is that we are all many parts. We're all different. This is a very important part, and we can dig further into it. As my son's getting into all things medical, there's 206 bones of the body. Of the 206, they're all very important. I think we could, attest to that. Each hand has 26 bones. Your foot has 27 bones. So just your feet and hands makes up half of all the bones in your body. So that's all quite important. But that's just the skeletal system. That system has to work with all the other systems in your body. And just like that, if we look around us here at church, there are many of us that are making up different systems, different ministries, and different facts. And there's nothing wrong with being part of the those in front, those in the back, the others. It's a vital aspect of Christian living and reflects Jesus' teaching. As we continue in 1 Corinthians, if the whole body were an ear, where would the sense of smell be? But in fact, God has placed parts in the body, every one of them, just as he wanted them to be. If they were all one part, where would the body be? As it is, there are many parts, but one body. There was always, you look at some of the stories of like, I want to be that other. But, you can't always just say, today, the I don't want to be that anymore. Today, I want to hear. That's great, but you don't have the parts to do that. That isn't necessarily the ministry. As we start looking at that is the ministry. That isn't the part that you have to play. So where can we take that? Where can we look at that scripturally? If we start looking at that scripturally, then let's look at what does it mean to be overlooked? Well, I can tell you one thing, it sucks. For all of us that are the introverts, for all of us that are the extroverts, extroverts have it easy. It's easy to get up front. The introverts, they like to be recognized too. We're going to dig a little deeper and look at someone who was overlooked. Aaron, brother of Moses. So who is Aaron? We look at, biblically, Moses, he gets all the attention. He's the baby. He's the youngest. Miriam, the eldest. But, then we have Aaron. He's in the middle. So as I started to look this up, middle child. I have one of those. Oh, and then I found out, middle child syndrome. Yeah, no, there is no such thing. No, not at all. And then I started looking at, they have personality traits. They like being loyal. They're the mediator. They're the diplomat. They're independent. And then it leads to some examples like they're more reliant on friends than family. It's like, reminds me of, I have a middle. First in the family to leave home? Check. Yeah, he was the first one to move out. Protective of relationships? Yeah, he's very protective of relationships. And so, as a father of four now, we classify it now. Alex, who you see running around. Alex, I would classify him now because of the age gap. He's the only child. So we have the other that are the three, and we have the classic oldest, middle, and who we now say is the former baby of the family. And all of them seem to fall into these different categories. So let's look at Aaron. Aaron starts to make sense of here. We first are introduced to him. He's back at the time of, you're hearing about Moses. Moses is down there. It's all Moses, Moses, Moses. He's been taken by Pharaoh, and growing up, if that's all you're going to hear is like, do you remember that one that's no longer here? And then hearing that over and over. And if you look at the Bible, it skips ahead. We don't hear about Aaron again until he's in his 80s. This is a long time to be overlooked. And then when does he enter the picture again? He enters the picture when Moses is there on the mount, and he's, as heroes do. They're the ones that argue. They get to argue with God, go through those types of things of where he's putting up, those whole things. I can't talk. I have a stutter. And it's like, but you have a brother, Aaron. Aaron will come in. Aaron will be your spokesperson. So as we start to look through the story here, there's a lot of attention put on Moses, but Aaron has his role to play. As we start looking a little bit more to Aaron, as he goes into this, he's there. He becomes the diplomat. Oh yeah, that's back on the list of traits of a middle child. Yep, check. He's a diplomat. Does he always do the right thing? No. There's that little incident of the golden calf, where they were going to go melt down, and he forgot. Moses was been around not for a while, so you look at him again, and it's like, oh, great, we have someone who's the middle. He's the spokesman, but he's also one that doesn't always do the right thing, which makes him, I look at it, more like me. I don't always do the right thing. And then, he had to look at a decision. Do you look at the absent leader? Do you go do this? What do I do? What do I do? No, he did not make the right decision. But you look at Aaron, and Aaron had a legacy. Aaron started the priesthood. He was the foundation of this. His contributions established the practice. And yes, it gets overlooked because, there's all about Moses, but all of the Levitical priesthood and practices and things all started with Aaron. He had very strong contributions to everything else. And so you look at Aaron, and what's important to look at is Aaron was in a support role. He was the supporting actor to the great story, but it was a very important role. His life, if you look at it, looks at the complexities of where our life is. It's easy that there's others that are more influential that get written about more, but some of the other bigger accomplishments can happen from there. So what does Aaron teach us? He teaches us about being in a support role, being unrecognized, and the challenges around that, and then the contributions that we can do for that. And then Jonathan. I think we might have talked a little bit about this. Does anyone remember anything about Jonathan? Oh, okay, Duncan, you remember? He was overlooked as well, because as we went through his resume, he was the friend of David. He was the son of King Saul. He was the prince, the crown prince of Israel. But what is he most known for? Bravery. Good. He was the warrior, but he was also known as the best friend of David. The best friend of David, and yet he had to deal with, he was to be king of Israel. And as we look around 1 Samuel, you'll start to see there's a lot of stories there that are focusing on David and his journey to kingship. But Jonathan himself was brave, he was selfless and loyal, but again, he was a supporting actor to David. He supported. He himself, being best friend, was willing to set aside the crown, his future, what was given to him for David. That is a very big thing to give up. Giving away, this is your whole career, this is your whole future, and you're going to give it to someone else. As we go through this time period and look at the stories, Saul and David get the spotlight. But Jonathan had another role. His other role was he was a mediator between David and between Saul. When Saul would get in a bad mood and start throwing things, javelins, little things like that, throwing them at your head. And where was Jonathan? He was in the middle trying to mediate between that. It's like, okay, calm down. Because you both have to be David, best friend, Saul, king and father. How do you balance that? That is, that is a juggle. That is, as I look at it, more relative to something we have to do. We have to juggle. We have to sometimes, again, support maybe someone else is better in this role than I am. For instance, today, as a speaker, this is not my forte. This is not what I'm good at. That's why you get me only once a year at the last Sabbath of the year. But I ask this question of you. Can we do this? Can we sacrifice our own personal ambition for the greater good? Do we really understand the importance of God's plan, of being able to support it full tilt, even if it runs counter to our own personal interest or even societal, expectations? You know who else gets overlooked? Mothers. There's a story of once there was this woman who married while in school. Her life was on track to this fulfilling career. The life was it's a whirlwind of activity, all these plans, these things going on. And then she got pregnant. And then her life changed. She can switch to feeling invisible. No longer is it the person, it's the incubator. The children that come up and want to rub the belly. The people who will just out of the blue in the supermarket said, "Oh, you're expecting." That connective thing, that it's no longer about the woman, but now about the mother and the child. Then life changes. Life becomes everything that she did BC, before children. And then at that point it was, focus on these goals, focus on these activities, and then it all shifts to taking care of these tiny little ones that all have different needs and seem to sometimes all cry for different needs at the same time. I still remember our three. And what does she do? She puts their needs ahead of her own. People used to notice her. They used to say, "Hey, that was a great job," when they used to see her at work. But now she may be the stay-at-home mom during that first couple years, trying to wean, trying to get them off to school. And then it changes into, "Okay, here's your lunch. Here, it's ready." It's always that life of service. It's always to the little ones. It's always to "Okay, I want to read one more story. Can I have that snack? I know it's in between meals." To can I stay up a little later? And all those other things that come along with it. The world doesn't see the stacks of clean dishes, dirty dishes. They don't see the laundry, the clean, the folded, the not clean, the not folded. All these things, you look at life BC, before children, could have been different. It's the paradox, though, the paradox of motherhood. Because what the moms did is that everything that they did matters to the children. Everything that was there, because the nutritious meals were done, they grow strong. Because the books were read, they have imagination, they have ideas. Where can they go? They opened up their world to new ideas and imagination. Everything that has happened was important, even if it seemed unimportant at the time. And the world doesn't see it. They don't see the struggles. Even us as husbands, we don't always see it either. We're busy with our work, we're busy with this, and we don't see and peek around the corner I was remembering when prepping this, I was remembering my mom, and when she was working full time, and then full time in her work, but having to get, all the meals, the lunches ready for me to go to school, and then afterwards, after school, after everyone was home, just all that chaos, that busyness. But yet I still remember lots of great one-on-one times with my mom. Everything matters. So let's look at a little bit more about this overlooked. There are some emotional and spiritual impacts of being overlooked that are profound and far-reaching. So let's first start looking at the emotional side. Being overlooked can lead to low self-esteem and self-worth. If you're constantly being overlooked, you can feel inadequate. You can feel diminished. You can have that lack of self-worth. You may start to question your own abilities, the value, and that just comes this little loop of, oh, well, then I'm not that confident to do things. It can lead to loneliness and isolation. If you're feeling unnoticed or underappreciated, this becomes even more evident when you're back into that group setting. And it's like everyone sees everyone, the extrovert, the loud one, but no one always sees the quiet, the one at the edge. All of this can start, making them feel disconnected in the group, but not. It can lead to frustration and resentment. You can feel frustrated. You can get angry. If you see, others are being recognized, hey, how come they got recognized for that? This all can go around. And, ultimately it can lead to depression, anxiety, prolonged feelings of feeling undervalued, invisible. You can just get further and further. On the flip side, there's also a spiritual component to this. If we look at the spiritual side, this can also start to lead people to question their own faith and beliefs. They might wonder, why is it that the efforts that I'm doing, it's not leading to something better? That journey of faith can be hard. It can lead to your loss of purpose and direction. Being in church, being part of something that's pulling you towards a direction, being overlooked, it can disrupt this sense. You can feel like they're lost in a spiritual way, and their efforts, what they're trying to do in a spiritual sense, is futile. It's like, I'm praying, but no one's listening. There can be a diminished sense of community. The converse of looking at being in that group setting, but not being recognized, feeling overlooked, feeling like, is this the right place? Do I belong here? It can ultimately lead to struggles with bitterness and forgiveness. It's like, life has just been so rough, and I'm not going to give any mercy. Next person who walks in that door, unless they're looking the right way, unless they're the right, then I'm not going to talk to them. Or the ministries of, well, we're going to do this and we're going to only do it this way and no other way because all other ways have failed. There's a lot of stubbornness that can lead into this. Why? Because of being overlooked. This is the negative side. But how can we cope? How can we overcome this? So seeking support is always important. If you're looking at the support from being able to let your church members, the person that you connect with, find that person that you can connect with, that you can get the support. Emotional, spiritual support, this is very, very important in our relationships. Friends, family, spiritual leaders, those that acknowledge and recognize your individual contributions. Self-reflection and affirmation. Self-reflection can be hard. I know I look at, looking at my own life, it's like, I remember when I was here and I would rather be there. And then it was like that old story, that footsteps in the sand. How many people remember that? The whole footsteps in the sand. There's so many times when you can look back and you're like, wow, that was a very, very rough time of my life. But look at what I learned from there. Look at where I came from. Spiritual practices. It's important to also look at another way of overcoming is, are you personally praying? And not praying in the sense of, this is the great genie, please grant me my wish, but more of the real spiritual prayers of, you look at David, you look at some of these other examples. They argued, they yelled, they opened their heart, they had open communication in their prayer with God. Why? Please help me. And also finding new avenues of expression. Another way of looking at that is like, maybe that one job isn't it for me because it brings up too many memories. I remember when that did that. Let me try something new. This might be a better fit for me. Something, that as that little cliche goes, does it bring you joy? Try to find those things instead of those things that weigh down on you of like, oh, there's too much negativity in there. And also remember that this feeling overlooked, it can be, try to help it to be just a momentary, but also recognize it in others. Because this leads us to what is going to be our response to this. So let's look at the teachings of Jesus. Let's look at that. We're just coming out of Christmas. When Jesus came, did he come here for the kings? Did he come here for the influential leaders, for the rulers? No, he didn't. He came for those that had already faded into the background, that were already overlooked, that were already feeling invisible in their areas. Those people of then should be our people of today. Who do we feel? Who do we see that's invisible? So one of the first ones to look at would be, let's look at Mark. This is a great story in Mark 10, verses 46 through 52. Then they came to Jericho, as Jesus and his disciples, together with a large crowd, were leaving the city. A blind man, Bartimaeus, which means son of Timaeus, was sitting by the roadside begging. And when he heard it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." Many rebuked him and told him to be quiet. And he shouted all the more, "Son of David, have mercy on me." This is a small sentence, but there's something here to unpack. Are we the blind man that is reaching out, asking, "Son of David, have mercy on me"? Or are we the ones that are saying, "Be quiet, shut up, we don't want to hear that, not here, this is not the right time"? We should also be the ones to help, be able to tell them, it's okay, shout louder, shout over the detractors, shout louder, "Son of David, have mercy on me." And Jesus stopped and said, "Call him." So they called to the blind man, "Cheer up, on your feet, He's calling you. Is that really a good answer? You just went from saying, no, be quiet, we don't want to hear you, to like, oh, wait, hey, you've been recognized. Come on. That's kind of, when I was reading that and looking at that in context, I was like, who am I? I'd like to be the blind man, but I can also say in my life, I've not always been the blind man. I might have been the one in the crowd saying, shh, no, not now. Throwing his cloak aside, he jumped to his feet and came to Jesus. What do you want me to do for you? Jesus asked him. The blind man said, Rabbi, I want to see. Go, said Jesus. Your faith has healed you. Immediately, he received his sight and followed Jesus along the road. So this is great. We can look at the whole, his faith made him whole. But look at that last sentence. Immediately he received his sight. That's great. But then the rest of it. And followed Jesus along the road. He was blind, but now he sees, and now he is with the people who just a few moments ago just told him to be quiet. This is about a group where we are all blind, we are all beggars, and yet we are also all the followers that make just as many mistakes. And we should watch ourselves of when we dwell, no, not now. The role of the church. As we go and we look further into 1 Corinthians here, what's interesting is that the rest of this, as we continue down through 1 Corinthians 12, the eye cannot say to the hand, I don't need you, and the head cannot say to the feet, I don't need you. On the contrary, those parts of the body that seem to be weaker are indispensable, and the parts that we think less honorable, we treat with special honor. And the parts that are unpresentable are treated with special modesty, while our presentable parts need no special treatment. So what's interesting here is the first time that I looked at this, everyone looks at the Cliff Notes version of 1 Corinthians 12. This is all about spiritual gifts. This is all about unity. We need to come together. But unpacking this portion, I started to look at, there's some other things. So as you look at, A&P, anatomy and physiology, some of this parts like around verse 22 becomes a little bit more interesting. There are parts of the body that seem weaker that are indispensable. The heart is a weak organ, but you have, your rib cage around it, the lungs are around it, that are protection. There are parts that are less honorable that we treat with special honor. There's parts of your body that you look at, it's like, it's not very important. I could miss it. And then, you start having failures, or I remember when I broke my toe, and I was thinking, toes, they're no big deal. You can break them. Okay, no, that's not true. Walking with a toe broken was not fun at all. But also the parts that are unpresentable, treated with special modesty. That phrase I found kind of interesting. There are parts of the body that are very important, but you need to shield. There's other parts that you need to show. There is a place for everyone. There is a place for the leader. There's a place for the one that's the obvious, but there is a place for the invisible, for the unseen, that are just as important, but should be recognized and should be seen. It's not on the slide, but as I was looking through this, I was coming across Acts 18, verses 1 through 4. And I found interesting the story of Aquila and Priscilla, which was another overlooked group. They were a couple, and they're introduced in Acts 18. After this, Paul left Athens and went to Corinth. There he met a Jew named Aquila, a native of Pontus, who had recently come from Italy with his wife Priscilla because Claudius had ordered all Jews to leave Rome. Paul went to see them, and because he was a tent maker as they were, he stayed and worked with them. Every Sabbath he reasoned in the synagogue, trying to persuade Jews and Greeks. So this was an interesting snippet about Paul. Paul was not only an evangelist, but he was also a tent maker. And his co-workers at work, this Priscilla and Aquila, they were tent makers, but that was their primary function. They were the regular workers. They were the everyday man. They weren't the preacher. They weren't the rabbi, the pastor that would be part of the church all week long. They had regular professional lives, and on the weekend, on Sabbath, they were there to persuade the Jews, the Greeks. They were part of the early church. One of the things there, did you catch that? This was in Corinth. They were part of the initial church that later Paul would write to them, the Corinthians. They were part of that initial group that grew the church. As you look a little bit further, and I'll leave this for your own reading to look further in Acts 18, but they were important people that were mentors, teachers, and hard workers. There's a story of them teaching Apollos, a well-educated person, and they were like, you're well-educated, but you don't know everything in the scripture, so come to our house, we'll feed you. And it goes from there. So 2 important lessons from there. Priscilla and Aquila, they might have been overlooked, but they teach us about hospitality, having your home open. Seems like we do things like that here. Small groups, other things. Come together. Come to my house. Let's eat. Let's be hospitable. Let's be a mentor. Let's teach. Further in Corinthians, but God has put the body together, giving greater honor to the parts that lacked it, so that there should be no division in the body, but that its parts should have equal concern for each other. If one part suffers, every part suffers with it. If one part is honored, every part rejoices with us. This is what we're asked to do. We're asked to look around. Our 5-minute prayer, I think, is one of our best areas, because it's when we can look, we can celebrate our praises, we can honor everyone who speaks, but even those that are important of the unspoken requests. And it's all important. We suffer together, we praise together. So this leads to, where do we want to go from here? How can we then be the agents of change? As we look through 2024, how can we then be those that can change where this is going? So some of the different ways that we can do that, let's look at it in our personal lives. Active listening and observation. This can be the hard part, to be able to listen, to see those around us, to be able to observe, and to decide, like, they look like they're not having a good day today. I need to make sure that I talk to them, happy Sabbath, are you okay? Being able to listen and observe, very important trait. Expressing appreciation. Regularly express gratitude and appreciate. A word of thanks, acknowledgement in group settings, in one-on-one settings, written notes, small gifts. There's all sorts of ways that you can, say, you know what, I appreciate you. What you're doing is great, and I love it. Inclusive conversations. I remember this. We actually have this as actually reminds me of a group work class, but it was what was important was like, how do you ensure that everyone is part of the conversation, including keeping track of the person who doesn't speak up, but maybe they're the introvert and maybe they don't want to speak in that group setting. So don't be in the group settings like, hey, we haven't heard from you from 35 minutes, please speak up. Talk to them offline. Talk to them separately. Not everyone is comfortable in those groups. Sometimes just a little bit like, I saw you. You had a question. Let's go through that. Mentoring and encouragement. Offer to mentor someone, to support someone. There's many around us that, maybe they feel that they're overlooked and undervalued. Encouragement is a very, very important area. Church action. So this is personal, how you look at when you're there. We look at church actions. We're doing that, I think, as we're joining small groups for some, but we're creating more small groups. As we start next year for 2024, there's a new Sabbath school class here in Springfield where we'll be looking at going through patriarchs and prophets. We're going to go through all the books and start looking at the Bible, looking at creation onward from the Ellen White perspective. There's other things of maybe you have another idea for another small group that is of interest. These are other great ideas, and see how we can do that. I know as a working type person and not retired, it can be difficult to find the small groups of like, oh, that's on Tuesday at 2 o'clock. That's at 1 o'clock. Well, I've got meetings and work then. I won't ever be able to be a part of it. So I know I'm thinking, what kind of small group can we do for those that are still working? Some things that we're looking at. Feedback. We're definitely going to be looking in 2024 for feedback about, as a church, how can we have some other ideas? Surveys. As you've seen them come up during announcements, we'll have more of those. I'm looking for feedback from our church members to see how we can, better have programs for everyone. Volunteer. So many of you are volunteering, and I know some that have even changed their schedules around things of Operation Hunger. It has been one of those great ministries that, thank you for all that you've done with that. This has been a wonderful ministry. Because it's important that as we look through all this, we need to remember and keep in the back of our minds, we're a hospital for broken bodies, for hurt bodies. We're not a health club. We are a hospital. We include everyone at different places in their journey. An acknowledgement for our own members. This I thought was important. I kind of came to this towards the end of putting everything together, and I was like, you know what? There's a lot of people that we have seen and unseen here. So at the end of 2023, I would like to, acknowledge, and I want to thank you for Celeste, Bill, Howard, John, Janelle, they ensuring that Springfield has been well maintained. Randy, Ron, Chet, Gordon, Josh, for ensuring that New Carlisle has been well maintained. For Elizabeth, for Randy, for all that the work that they do to make sure that the bills are paid, and all the treasury work, and all that management and accounting that I am certainly glad I don't have any part of. To Janelle, Ed, Linda, Jonathan, Hazel, Joanne, for helping with VBS earlier this year. That was wonderful. I love VBS. This is now our second year, and we're still planning as we go into the third year, and growth. There'll be new people for next year. On the AV side, Celeste, Duncan, Mamouche, Joanne, Sarah, Matthew, Ed, Ron, Becky, and Doug, across all these different congregations. Jennifer, Becky, the bulletin. This bulletin, they do this week in, week out, getting together all the announcements, making sure that they're all there and edited and put together. To all of our singers, those that are the last minute additions, and everyone else that gets to be up front and lead us in song service. And there's so many names because we have so many different people between our churches. To John, Howard, Ron, who've worked to ensure that the waters have been warm enough for the many baptisms throughout this year. To the unseen hands that ensure that we have a warm, inviting, welcoming church through decorations, through being greeters. Jennifer, Janelle, Hazel, Maribel, Becky, Susan, and Connie. There are so many that have worked on that. To the unseen elders that pray for this church, that pray for all of us, that pray for these ministries and where they are and where they could be. To all those that help ensure that our kitchens and the food is all organized. I've already seen people that have already stepped out working to make sure that all the food is prepped, ready, and hot, and good to go. And there's many names, and I don't even think this name list is complete. Janelle, Rachel, Jennifer, Maribel, Joanne, Susan, Becky, Sarah. To all our many unseen prayer warriors, those that pray based upon the emails, and to Celeste, who owns the whole prayer email distribution and makes sure that everyone gets to see it, gets to be added to it, so that the rest of us can pray for all these many needs in our church. And I already started, but there's so many names when it comes to Operation Hunger, Springfield and Park Lane that help with all these ministries, and as they also look at expansion in the new year, as we look at the potential for ACS, Adventist Community Services, there's more opportunities to volunteer for and in the new year. So as we close out, I also want to look forward and also challenge you to look at 1 Corinthians 12. There is a lot here to unpack. And it's also very interesting that this whole talk going through unity, looking through the various parts, is right before 1 Corinthians 13, which everyone knows is the whole love chapter. How are you supposed to love? This is some very good reading just of these two chapters, and also to see more about kind of the history and around the people that are the unseen, the invisible. Because if we didn't have them, there would be some very large gaping holes in our ministry, in our church life. So, as we close out, thank you to all, including those that I forgot to mention, which is many, and our many other ministries. And closing song time.